Shelby here. Welcome back to A Little Literary Love. Glad y'all are with me today. Today's video is going to be a monthly wrap-up. It's been a hot minute since I've done a wrap-up. This is going to be for the month of April. Yeah, I haven't done a wrap-up. I think my last wrap-up was my end of November wrap-up for 2022. I'm not really going to be posting about all of the books that I've read like in between like December, January, February. I didn't read any books in March. And we're just gonna jump right to April. If you really want to know what I read, you can go to my Goodreads, look at that. I always post on there like what I'm reading, but those few months were when I was having a lot of mental health things going on, and I just wasn't excited about reading, and most of the books that I was picking up, I just didn't really care for. They're not very memorable to me either, so I'd rather just go ahead and jump into doing like my monthly, potentially mid-month, bi-weekly wrap-ups here in April, because April has been the first month that I've actually been excited again to read, and I've read some really good books this month. So we're gonna hop right into it with the books that I read in April. So the first one is going to be Mercy by Sarah Kate. I have continued my journey with this series, the Salacious Players Club series. This is the fourth book of the series. And this one I had been putting off for a while just because it wasn't my favorite tropes that were featured in this book. So this is about Beau. He is the son of one of the owners of the Salacious Players Club, and he does not like his father. He does not like that his father owns a sex club, does not like that his father created this like kinky, somewhat dating app that all of his friends get on and use to find like hookups with people, and he just has a very like sour view of his father in this whole club, until one day his friends convince him like, hey, just try it out, see what happens. And he was like, okay, whatever, it's gonna be dumb, it's not gonna like match me with anybody, it's gonna tell me like something stupid. And when he takes the quiz and he from this quiz, he finds out that he is submissive, and he was like, no, that's not how I am, blah, blah, blah. But then he ends up matching with somebody, and the woman that he matches with is actually his father's friend and another owner of the Salacious Players Cup, and that would be Maggie. So this features a reverse age gap, so it's an older woman, younger man. I think he is early 20s, she's in her 30s, I believe. It also features a male submissive, and Maggie is the dominant in the relationship. This honestly wasn't my favorite of the series. I did still give this 4 stars. I did still very much enjoy this. Mostly because I enjoyed the character growth that we get, especially with Beau, but also a little bit with Maggie too. She hasn't really delved into much of her desires for wanting to be more dominant in the bedroom, mostly because how she grew up, women being sexual in her mind and how she grew up is a bad thing. So it's taking her some time to come into her own and to accept that about herself. But I really like the dynamic between these two, and it was very enjoyable. Steam on this, of course, is very high, just like all the books in this series, and I do really enjoy this. It just, like I said, it's probably my least favorite out of them, but like all of the books in this series have at least 4 stars, if not higher. So it's still a really great series, and it does a really great book too. Then I read Does It Hurt by H.D. Carlton. This is a like romantic suspense story that I had heard a bunch of stuff about. I actually listened to this on audiobook, which I think is the way to go because it features a duet narrative. So typically with audiobooks, it's either like one narrator is doing like all the voices, or you might have two narrators for like if it's a man and a female, and they'll go back and forth between their points of view, like the chapters. But with this being a duet narrative, even when there's the chapters where it's the female's point of view, whenever the man is talking, it is actually the male narrator talking, and it just creates a better I guess story like in my head when I was listening to it, just to have that duet narration, and I really loved it, and I really need to find more, but that's kind of besides the point. Anyway, so back to this book. So this is about this girl, and she is on the run, sort of. And she goes and she steals people's identities. Like, she meets up with these men and kind of seduces them, and then she takes their bank account info, or she takes their credit card or whatever, and then she goes off running again. And this is how she has been surviving for the past few years. So she does this to this man that she meets, and he realizes what she did, and he is a fishing boat captain? That doesn't sound right. I don't remember what he is, but I know he likes sharks. Like, sharks is a big theme with this book. And he, like, thinks like studies them. So he figures out that she stole his credit card, and so he goes off to try to like find her. Well, he does, and doesn't tell her that he knows her plan and what she's doing. And so he invites her to go out on another date, and so she just kind of like was really attracted to this guy that she stole from, and just like doesn't feel right like saying no, like she can't give it. She gives in to him pretty easily. So they go out on his boat, and he's like showing her like the sharks, and they have this really steamy scene that also terrified the shit out of me too. But anyway, while they're out on this boat, there is this big storm that comes through, and the two of them end up getting shipwrecked on this island that has a lighthouse. And then there is this older man that runs the lighthouse that they end up having to stay with him, because he says there's not going to be another boat with like shipments coming through, and there's no radio that works. The boat isn't going to be coming through for another like month or so. And there's a lot of like creepy things that are going on, especially with the old man. There's also, they keep hearing things too, so there might be like the island might be haunted. There's a lot of different things that are going on. I gave this 4 stars. I really enjoyed this book. I loved the like mystery of it. Like, the whole plot that was going on with this book was probably my favorite part of it, just because it was so mysterious, and I was trying to figure out what was going on with this island and this man that lives at the island. But in the meantime, you also have these two characters, our main protagonists of the story, that the man hates her because he's like, you're a criminal, you're a bad person, you stole from me. But then he's also enraptured by her and curious about her, because she has a lot of stuff in her like backstory that is causing her to do all of these things. And so he's fascinated by her, and also very attracted to her, and wants to have sex with her. So it's learning through all of those dynamics while also trying to survive on this very creepy island, and they don't know what's going on. Steam on this is very high. Trigger warnings. There's definitely some trigger warnings to this, and I would suggest you look those up, because I don't want to spoil anything. There's a lot of breath play, and probably the most unique type of breath play that I have ever read in a book, because it involves like being in the ocean. And then also there's sharks. So there's also like a, I don't know what you would call it, like fear play maybe? I don't know. But I thought this was really good. I will definitely, whenever H.G. Carlton puts out any other books, I will definitely be continuing reading her, whatever she puts out, because all of her stories I find very intriguing, and I don't understand her mind sometimes, but I'm here for it. Then I read Bloodied Hands by Adelaide Forrest. This is the first book in her Blandy Crime Syndicate series. I picked this one up because I have not read an Adelaide Forrest book, and I had heard a lot of good things about her series, and she's got several mafia series, and they all kind of tie into this like same world, and it all starts with this one. So this is about our two characters. This is a little bit of a second chance romance. Our two characters were together when they were in high school, and then right before the end of high school, he breaks up with her in a very like public way. So flash forward years later, and he ends up stumbling across her again and realizes that he kind of pushed her away when he in high school because he was trying to protect her, because he's this big like mafia person. But now that he's seen her again, he decides that he can't let her go, and he is going to force a courting on her, basically. I did not like this book, like, at all. I gave this 2 stars. I was very disappointed in this book, mostly because it felt like everything was very forced upon the heroine. Most of it was, some of it's like that borderline dub con, non-con. Some of it might have been a little bit more non-con. It's that gray area. I just don't like how much he pushed himself on her and didn't let her make her own decisions or have a choice in anything that was going on. He also didn't explain anything to her. He was just like, yeah, this is how it is. And she's like, why? Like, I don't understand, until like, I think he tells her that he's in the mob like at the very end. He also doesn't really tell her like why he like broke up with her when they were in high school. But I also just didn't really care for, even with all of that, I hate how easily she forgives him for everything that he does. I wanted there to be so much more groveling in this than there was. That would have, I think, redeemed the hero in my eyes a little bit, but then that also would have redeemed the heroine, because I just felt like she was very flat type of character. She wasn't a very strong female character either, which I tend to prefer more stronger female characters in my books. And just because she gave in so easily to him, I just kind of felt like that in and of itself just made her not a strong character, and I wanted her to push back more than what she did. Steam on this I would consider more medium, and I do not think I am going to continue with this series. I'm still debating on if I'm just going to move on to one of her other mafia series. I might do that. I've also considered trying out, because she also writes as the author Harper L. Woods. That is another name for her, and that is her name that she uses for her fantasy romance books, and I've heard really good things about those. So I think I'm still going to give this author another chance, at least with her fantasy romance, if not with one of her other mafia books, just to see if it was just this book that I didn't really care for, or if it's her in general. Then I read From Blood and Ash by Jennifer L. Armentrout. This is the first book in the Blood and Ash series that everybody is reading and talking about, and I had yet to pick this up, mostly because it is so hyped. I am not the biggest fan of reading overly hyped books, because I just feel like because they're so hyped, they end up falling really flat for me. But this book is about Poppy, and she is known as the Maiden, and she is secluded, she is special, she is supposed to be protected until she ascends, whatever being ascended means. So she wears a white veil. Nobody is supposed to see her face. Nobody is supposed to touch her. She basically like has no life of her own. And so she's just living out her life, just waiting until she ascends. And she has these like personal guard for her, protecting her, and she happens to get a new one, and his name is Hawk, and she thinks he's really sexy, and she has a crush on him, and they start talking more and forming a relationship, even though they're not supposed to, because she's not supposed to have relationships with anybody because she is the maiden. And things delve more through there. I gave this 4 stars. I really enjoyed this. I enjoyed this more than I thought it was going to be. I loved the like forbidden love aspect of it. The only thing I wish, this was much more of a lower steam book. It definitely builds up more in the later books, which we'll get to in a little bit, but I really enjoyed this one. I do understand, I was reading a bunch of reviews for this one where like of a lot of people that don't like it, and I definitely understand that, because Jennifer Armentrout, she is a good storyteller, but there's a lot of things that happen in this book and throughout the series that I feel is not very original, especially like her world. Oh, there's tons of things that are like taken from other books that I read, or even like the names are very unoriginal. It ends up turning into kind of like a vampire, potentially slash fae kind of story, and just a lot of the names just feel very unoriginal. So I definitely understand why people don't like this book and don't really care for this author, but I still very much enjoyed reading this. This, I feel like, is almost like elevated Twilight. Like, it's one of those where it's just like a guilty pleasure kind of read. It just is fun. And that's why I liked it, even though like the writing, like, yes, the writing is better than Twilight, but it could have just tweaked it a little bit. It could have been so much better than it is to bump it up to that 5-star rating, but I still am giving it 4 stars. I am still continuing on with this series just because it is so fun and just, it's been so enjoyable for me. But yeah, so moving on to the next one. Then I read Hellfire by Mariel Pomeroy. This is the first book in her Graphi Santa series. I'm going to try to explain this book as best as I can. This is about our heroine, Ahaya, and she is a daughter, a creature of like more of the light, supernatural creatures, I guess, because this is a fantasy romance. And her mother dies, and a lot of bad things have been happening to her, so she runs away and she stumbles into like the realm of more darker, or considered darker, supernatural creatures, and she stumbles into the hands of the being that kind of runs that. So I think his name is like Ariok or something, and in order for him to provide her safety, he makes a deal with her. He will give her safety in his realm for about 7 days if she relinquishes her soul to him. So she does this because she doesn't want to go back to where she's from. And these two characters have a very steamy sexual tension between them that builds throughout this book that was very nice. However, I gave this book 3 stars. I was pretty disappointed in this because this is a book that I had hyped for myself because I follow this author on Instagram. She was a bookstagrammer and she decided to try to write a book. And I just feel like this book had so much promise to it, and it just fell so short. So this is supposed to be a high fantasy romance, and you can tell that with all of the names and her world that she had created, but how she created her world felt very flat. I'm still left like not quite understanding the world and what is, it needed much more explanation, much better world building, better descriptions of where they're at, like the setting. I think it also needed much more like fine tuning for the characters that she created. Some of the book also felt a little off because most of the book is told between the two perspectives of our main protagonist. However, near like the half mark of the book and then later on, there are chapters that are from the perspectives of some of the other sub like characters in the story that just felt really off and didn't really feel like they contributed well to the overall story. I almost felt like had she done that, then she needed to make the book a lot longer and have more of their perspectives throughout, not just Ahea and Ariox, or they needed to be cut completely and just focused in on just Ahea and Arioch. Because that she did that, some of her other like plot points that she was trying to sprinkle in just like felt like they went nowhere. And not just because like I get that there's going to be a second book to this series, so some of those plot points might be picked up and reformatted a little bit or reconfigured to like help solve them, I guess, but it just, I don't know, it didn't make sense for me in this book. I also didn't care for, this is such a big pet peeve for me. There were so many grammatical errors and typos in this that I'm just like, if you are going to publish a book, you need to reread everything and go over all of that or hire somebody to go through it. Like, if I am able to find all of these, they should be doing that. So that was a big pet peeve for me too. But yeah, I mean, I did enjoy Ahea and Arioch's growth between them. I very much enjoyed their sexual tension. Their sexual type scenes were a little bit more darker and edgier, a little bit more kinkier than what I've seen in a lot of fantasy romances, so I did enjoy that. The steam on this I would consider to be high because of that, but otherwise the rest of the book I didn't really care for. And I don't think I am going to be continuing on when the second book of this series releases, which I think is going to be in like May or June, maybe July, somewhere around there. But I don't think I'm gonna read it because I don't care that much. Then I read A Kingdom of Stars and Shadows by Holly Renee. This is the first book, and I think this is a trilogy. I could be wrong. It may be a series. The Stars and Shadows series. So this is about our main female character. She is, they call her something. I think it was star-touched. That might not be the exact word that they used, but she's seen as being like blessed by the stars, and she is given to the Fae Kingdom at a certain age to be betrothed to the prince, because after they're married, he will like drink her blood, and her blood, because it is like whatever they call it, will make his powers even greater than before. So she has no say in any of this. This has just been promised, and she's off to meet this prince, and she doesn't like that. She doesn't like that she has no decisions over her own life. And while she's going to meet the prince, she meets this other man who is actually the captain of the guard and who happens to be the prince's brother. And she is very intrigued by him. He is much darker. A lot of people tell her to stay away from him, that she shouldn't interact with him, but she's just absolutely drawn to this man and is fascinated by him. And they start somewhat of a forbidden love affair while she is supposed to be courting his brother. I gave this 3.5 stars. I did enjoy this. It just wasn't as enjoyable as I was hoping it would be. This was pretty addictive. I read it very quickly, but most of it felt very predictable. I just very much wish there was a lot more character and world building in this than what I got. It just ended up feeling a little bit more flat than I was wanting it to be. I would consider the steam on this medium high. And yeah, I'm still debating on if I'm going to continue this series or not. There was a little bit of a cliffhanger ending. There was like a twist at the end that I saw coming. Again, that whole being very predictable, and it kind of annoyed me. So I don't know. Like I said, I still haven't decided if I'm going to continue this series or not. Then I read A Kingdom of Flesh and Fire. This is the second book in the Blood and Ash series by Jennifer L. Armentrout. So the end of the first book, a lot of things come to light. I don't really know how much to delve into this, but basically what she had thought in the first book may not actually be reality. So she makes a deal with the man who is known as the Dark One, makes the deal with him to marry him in order for both of them to try and rescue their brothers that the Ascendant have amongst them, like have in their grasp. Yeah, I still gave this 4 stars. I still very much enjoyed this. This kind of like the action, like it died down a little bit in this book. I also didn't really care for like the regression that we had between our 2 main love interests, but then it kind of like built back up a little bit more and became a little bit stronger than how it had been. So I did appreciate that. The steam on this actually started to get a little bit higher than it was in the first book too, which I also appreciate, but it was still more like medium, potentially medium high, somewhere around there. So again, I gave it 4 stars. Then I read Too Tempting. This is the 4th book in the Heat Haven Omegaverse series by Sarah Blue. This is an Omegaverse story, of course. And this is about our heroine. She is an Omega. She has gotten out of a somewhat abusive relationship. And she is just wanting to enjoy herself and have fun. And she ends up meeting these 2 already established couples. And she wants to bring these 2 couples together to form like a big pack together. So this is mostly just about them kind of navigating that. I gave this 3 stars. I was hoping this would be better than it was. I mostly found this very boring. I liked the steamy scenes, and I really wanted to read this because this also featured a female-female pairing in here. So it is, if you read all like the description of it, it is an MFFMM. So it is polyamorous. There's these 5 people together, 3 men and 2 women, and all of them, like polyamory stories, all of them are in love with each other by the end and like interacting sexually with each other by the end. So that's mostly why I wanted to read it, because I've never read a like reverse harem story or a polyamorous story that was more than 1 female character in it. So I was fascinated by that. But again, like I enjoyed the steamy scenes, but the rest of it was just very boring, unfortunately, and was very saddened by it. But I've enjoyed a lot of Sarah Blue's books in the past, and all of her ideas for books that she has, they're very appealing to me, and I want to like them more than I do. And there's been a few that have been really good, so I will continue reading her books. She just released like a devil book, and she also released a Omegaverse hockey book that I'm interested in reading. And then I think she announced that she's actually going to be releasing some like just plain old like contemporary books at some point. So I'm very intrigued, and I do plan on continuing reading her stories. And then I read Highest Bidder, which is the 5th book of the Salacious Players Club series. And I'm debating on if this is my favorite one. It's like, all of these books are so good. It's hard to pick a favorite. So this 5th book, the first 4 books are actually Sarah Kate's like original plan for the series. And after Mercy, that whole original like kind of storyline plot line over the 4 books ends, and this is just kind of like a bonus about a side character. So this is about Daisy, who is a waitress at the Salacious Players Club series. She is basically homeless, like she lives in a van. She has come to the Salacious Players Club because she is fascinated by Ronan. Ronan is one of the richest members at the Salacious Players Club. And she is trying to learn more about him because he, when she was younger, had left a very large amount of money for her when she was younger, and she has no idea why. So she's fascinated by him, like wanting to figure out why he would have done this. And so how they kind of meet, or at least somewhat more get involved, is she ends up getting into like every week or every couple of weeks, the Salacious Players Club has an auction where women are like kind of auctioned off, and I think money goes to like charities or something, I don't know, whatever, and to win like a date with somebody there. And she gets auctioned off, and Ronan bids on her and wins. And then he like finds out that she doesn't have like an actual place to stay, so he like offers her to stay with him, and it starts out mostly platonic. Emphasis on the mostly, maybe. And then it evolves because they are very attracted to each other. Yeah, I really enjoyed this book. I give it 4 stars. I'm debating on raising that to like 4.5 stars. I loved everything about this. I love the tropes in this. So this features an age gap, and probably one of the biggest age gaps I've read. Daisy is in her early 20s, and Ronan is like 55, 56. So there's like a 30-year age gap between these two characters. Ronan is also dominant, and he is known as a pleasure dom. He likes just giving his partner pleasure, and he likes controlling that, thus being dominant. There's also a daddy kink in here, which y'all know how I love my daddy kink. There are trigger warnings in this book for both of our characters are dealing with a lot of grief. So Daisy has lost her mother fairly recently. And then Ronan is also still somewhat dealing with grief in the fact that years ago, like I think before even Daisy was born, he lost his wife and his child. So both of the characters are kind of dealing with that. I did really like the growth that we saw with both of these characters, especially Daisy. It made me so happy reading this. And their love story, like he's so protective of her and just such a like cinnamon roll kind of character, and I just loved it. I ate it up. It was so good. Yeah. And then the last book that I read for the month of April is going to be Blood Orange by Karina Halley. This is the first book in her Dracula duet. So, like the series name, this is a Dracula retelling. This takes place in modern day, and we have Dahlia. She is a witch and a slayer of vampires, and she is tasked with getting close to Valtu, who is our Dracula character, and getting close to him in order to kill him. But she's also getting close to him because she needs to find out where this book is that some vampires stole from a witch, and it's like a book of like spells, but this book allows the vampires to open portals and to get all these like demonic creatures into the human realm. So she needs to find out where this book is by getting close to Valtu. In the meantime, we as the readers know, not quite, like it takes a while for characters to find out, but Dahlia is Valtu's reincarnated long-lost love. So when he became a vampire, he was in love with this girl named Mina, and she died. Years later, he finds her again in the form of Lucy, and she also died as Lucy. So here she is again being reincarnated. So it has that like star-crossed lovers kind of thing going on with it. I gave this 3 stars. I was disappointed by this one again. I think I struggled with this. I think the first half of this book probably would have been a 4-star. Like, had the first half continued on, definitely would have been a 4-star. Second half of this book was much more of like a 1 to 2-star range. So I kind of met in the middle and gave it 3 stars. My problem with this is that the second half of the book, I felt like the author basically forgot about literally every plot point that she was doing and basically just got dazzled by Valtu's dick along with our heroine. Our heroine completely forgot everything about being a slayer and just wanted to be around him and have sex with him. And it just felt very lost with the story. Like, it didn't make any sense to me because she has like a handler that is like helping her keep her on track. There was virtually no mentions of them in the second half of the book. Not much mention of what she's supposed to be doing. There's not as much struggle as I was wanting there to be with this, because it is like so forbidden. They are actually enemies, even though he doesn't know that they're enemies. And I just didn't really care for it. I also hated the ending of this. It was very anticlimactic, and it really generally like pissed me off. Potentially also because I knew, since I follow Karina Halley on like social media platforms, I knew that she originally had planned for this to be just a standalone book. It was just going to be a book in of itself. And then I guess while she was writing it, she decided that it needed to be longer than what she originally planned. So I think some of that stuff kind of got like scrapped, I guess, somewhere in there so that she could make a second book to this. But I honestly just feel like she should have just made this a little bit longer and worked on it a little bit more, instead of, it felt just like rushed, like she was trying to get it out. I just wish she wouldn't have done that, and I wish she would have taken her time to develop things a little bit better, and I don't think a second book is necessary. And I don't really plan on reading the second book because of how the ending just left like a sour taste in my mouth, and I didn't really care for it. Steam on this can be high. Lots of trigger warnings in this one. There's death, obviously, because Dahlia's character, her reincarnated character, dies several times. So then there's Valtu that's dealing with grief over her death. There's also child loss a couple of times in this book. And a lot of other stuff going on too. There's like torture, lots of blood, obviously, it's vampires. But yeah, I don't know. I've honestly been pretty disappointed by Karina Halley lately. Like, all the books that I've picked up from her, I've just been wanting more, and they haven't been what I wanted, and honestly feel like they haven't been what I've been promised. So I am still intrigued by, she has this like fantasy romance, dark fantasy romance that's based on like Norse mythology that I find interesting. And then she also just announced here recently that she has a Little Mermaid Pirates of the Caribbean dark fantasy romance retelling that is coming out in May. That one I'm very excited for, and I really hope it's good. I don't know, she has all these good ideas, and I just really want to read them. I just hate that I keep being disappointed by them. So there we go. That is going to be the end of this wrap up. These are all the books that I read for the month of April. Leave a comment down below with some of your favorite reads from the month of April. Make sure you hit the thumbs up button if you enjoyed this video, and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I really appreciate it. Otherwise, I will see you all in the next one. Bye, guys.